Well, greetings, colleagues. I hope you are well today. Welcome to Ask the Realtor with Karen Vamaro, and I'm John Rakowski. Karen, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm so excited. This is
Excellent.
great.
I'm excited to share our experience and knowledge with anybody who's watching and listening to this, both buyers, sellers, and realtors. And we get asked all the time because of our experience some common questions that many may think are just basic, but they're very important because they're part of the contract. So, Karen, the first question we had from one of our colleagues was, do washer and dryers automatically convey on a FAR bar or FAR bar as is contract?
Okay, well, the direct answer is no. So there is a section where there is pre-written appliances that remain at the property. So I would suggest like making sure you're reading that. And if you don't understand it, ask an attorney because we are not attorneys. But the washer and dryer must be included under the additional, it must be typed in and included under additional personal property staying.
Absolutely correct. The washer and dryer is probably one of the most common mistakes agents and their buyers make on an offer because they're assuming it's conveying because it's kind of plugged in. You know, the water lines are going into the wall, but they do not. So for the most part, Karen's right. Make sure you're reading that section of the contract, and that is in on page one, paragraph one, section D, as in David, what conveys. So if in doubt, write it out, right? If you don't know if it conveys or not, write it down. Washers and dryers do not convey unless they are handwritten or typed into the contract. So that is absolutely the correct answer. Thank you,
And I want to
Karen.
inject one other thing, John, because
Sure.
you have the contract. I believe when they revised that as is contract, not recently, but the prior, they took the microwave out as conveying. Is that correct?
Let me read on here what does convey so we're clear. Ranges, ovens, refrigerators, dishwashers, disposal, ceiling fans, light fixtures, drapery rods and draperies, blinds, window treatments, smoke detectors, garage door openers, thermostats, doorbells, television wall mounts is a new one, and television mounting hardware. So you're right, the microwave is not on there. But if it's built in to the wall, if it's secured like above the range into a cabinet, to me, that is a fixture. But again, if in doubt, write it out, for example. And another part of the appliances is if you noticed, everything was plural there. So it was ranges, refrigerators, to include wine refrigerators. So if to make sure that it conveys, and the fridge in the garage is conveying, and the wine cooler or wine refrigerator is conveying, write it in there to add it to the terms. It's not wrong, and you're not missing it if it is written in the contract. So,
Right. And
yes,
as far as the seller goes, if you want to, that special curtain that matches your bedspread in the bedroom, if you want that to stay, you better exclude that.
that is
Um,
correct. And that's on the next section, which is the following items are excluded from the purchase. Some of the things that Karen and I have seen over the years is like the chandelier or something that was gifted from the family, you know, down through the generations. Make sure that that is in the exclusion line and does not convey, even though it may be built in. If a seller wants the washer and dryer, they want to take it with them, they would add the washer and dryer there just to protect themselves as well. So that's a very
right.
common question and an error that is made a lot of times. If you want the washer and dryer, write it into the contract, right? Right.
Yes.
Question number two, Karen. Where do I make the escrow check out to, and how many days do I have to make the deposit?
Okay, so if you're looking at the as is for a bar, which I think is commonly used in our area these days, it it stipulates if you leave that blank, how many days, then it diverts to it is automatically 3 days. And that does not mean business days. If you go under contract on a Saturday, that Sunday counts as day one.
That is
I
correct.
think that's a misconception with some realtors out there or buyers misunderstanding that. So
Absolutely
3
correct. Yep.
yeah,
If
unless you
that
write it in.
Right, that section of the contract, it simply says if left blank 3 days. And that's what's fairly normal. And our attorney friends will tell us never leave anything blank, even if it defaults to a number. So in this case, if left blank 3 days, put 3 days in there if you need to. But what I would suggest is look at a calendar. Okay. Make sure you know that the buyer has the time to make that deposit within that time frame, because that's a part of the contract that's, a very important part of the date that a deposit must be made. And as far as where the deposit is to be made, that same section in the contract on page 1 will state who the title company is and their information. If you don't know it, ask the listing agent, hey, who's doing the closing? So our buyers know, who to make the deposit out to. Any more other comment on that, Karen?
No, that is accurate. And no, good.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to bring up, Karen brought up a very good point, that days on the FAR bar contracts are calendar days, not business days. So the effective date is the date that both parties sign and everybody's delivered back the contract. That is the effective date. All time frames start the next day. So if it's 3 days for escrow, day 1 is the following day. If a date ends on a holiday or weekend, it would default to the next business day. Days are very, very important, and a very common error made by some agents and obviously the buyers, because they don't realize when a deposit is going to be made.
All right.
Good job, Karen. The last question for today is, how much time would you normally give a seller to respond to an offer?
I would say at least 24 hours. Sometimes there's pressure when the buyer is like, I want a response in 3 hours. Well, sometimes it's hard for us to be able to get the seller on the phone. Everyone's working. I would say at least 24 hours. Sometimes I see 2 days, but then it depends on the market. If the market is really hot and you think that property's going to go, you might not want to give them 2 or 3 days. But I think a good practice also is ask the listing agent, how many people are there people that you have to sign that are out of town that might be hard to get. Always communicate. In today's day and age, we don't communicate with each other anymore. It's just all texting, and you lose that. So I think a good practice is the buyer's agent should pick up the phone, call the listing agent, and ask some of these questions, just so everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely correct. And I think it's also placing the offer in a more likable position when you ask the listing agent, hey, what would be convenient for the seller as far as a closing date? How much time do they need to respond? Because the last thing you want is to submit an offer and then get a counter offer just to change the dates and the times for a closing date or when they can respond.
Right.
Depending on the market, always place your offer in the best light for your customer, depending if you're, operating as the buyer's agent or the seller's agent. So, Karen and I are going to do these Q&As on a weekly basis. And should you have any questions about real estate, please ask us. We are Florida Realtors. We certainly can't advise outside the state of Florida, but we'd be glad to answer your questions and get you the proper answer. And if we don't know it, we're going to get you the answer from our legal team as well. So, Karen, any closing words on our first segment today?
Oh, I love this. And even if you are out of state, it doesn't necessarily have to be a state directed question. It could be maybe something about listings, like your best practices on listings or best practices on buyer, representing a buyer, things like that, that are general.
Absolutely correct. So stay tuned for more Ask the Realtor. That is Karen Vamaro. And this is John
That is
Rakowski.
John Rakowski.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as we ham and egg it, as we always do, we're here to help you in your real estate careers and in buying and selling real estate. Karen, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.